Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I am Morton Blackwell, president of the Leadership Institute. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our Wednesday Wakeup Club breakfast. We live in interesting times. One of the very wisest of the conservative scholars and media personalities, Victor Davis Hanson, says that we are now actually experiencing in this country a revolution. And there are signs that the left is determined one way or another to create a revolution in this country. Elections in Wisconsin and in Chicago yesterday, the extreme left candidates won. And last night on Fox News, Mark Levin was being interviewed. He expressed utter contempt for the prosecution of Donald Trump, and he said that this is a mistake for the left and that they're going to make a martyr out of Donald Trump. He didn't say whether that was a figurative or literal description. We shall see. I encourage you to live tweet today's events. The hashtag is on the screen. In 2022, your Leadership Institute trained 15,173 conservatives in 719 separate training programs. Since 1979, the Institute has trained over 258,000 activist students and leaders, and we're now ahead of last year's pace. You have before you the schedule of Leadership Institute activities for the upcoming month. Please take a moment to review these schools and consider attending one or more or sending a friend to one of our trainings. If you are watching online, visit our website at leadershipinstitute.org/trainings to see upcoming online and in-person training. My personal intern this semester is Kirk D. George III. He is from Corpus Christi, Texas, and currently attends Texas A&M Corpus Christi, where he is pursuing a degree in political science. Before attending college, Kirk served in the United States Coast Guard for 4 years and was stationed in San Juan, Puerto Rico. He's president of his Turning Point USA chapter. He also serves as a member of the recruitment committee for his school's chapter of the Phi Gamma Delta fraternity. In his free time, Kirk enjoys fishing, spending time with his fraternity brothers, and working on his 1974 Volkswagen Thing. After graduating, Kirk hopes to pursue his Juris Doctor at St. Mary's School of Law. Kirk, will you step up here and pronounce an invocation for us and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Kirk?
Thank you, Martin. If everyone please bow their heads there. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this gathering of minds, of hearts. We thank you for the opportunity for Mr. Gigline to come to speak with us. We pray that his words give us wisdom and hope and optimism. Please bless everyone around here that we may be safe in our travels after this, and that we may go on about our day and have a great day. Amen.
Amen.
And if you'll now join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Kirk. And now for our programs report. Kaylee Frederick was born and raised in Brighton, Mississippi? As a graduate of Brighton High School and the founder of the Turning Point USA Livingston County Activism Hub it's Michigan, MI, it fooled me. In Michigan, Kaylee spent many years at a nonprofit in the high school and middle school ministry department. In this role, she managed over 50 volunteers and interns, coordinated programs that ranged from 200 to 500 attendees, and has served as a keynote speaker. In the fall of 2021, Kaylee attended the Youth Leadership School in San Francisco. After her Youth Leadership School, she was accepted into the Leadership Institute's Spring 2022 internship program. During her time as an LI intern in the Youth Leadership School division, she learned how to develop a recruitment plan, organize trainings, as well as handle the day-to-day functions of the division. Kaylee is currently the coordinator of Youth Leadership Schools at the Institute. And in this position, she travels the country to train conservative activists on how to run effective youth campaigns for candidates and causes of their choice. Kaylee, please step up here and give us our brief programs report.
Thank you. Good morning. Like Morton said, my name is Kaylee, and I am the coordinator of Youth Leadership Schools at Leadership Institute, and I'm excited to be here with you to give you the program update. Last year, with the help of the National Field Program and Campus Reform, the J. Henges Center for Youth Leadership was able to double the number of students trained in the Youth Leadership School and increase the number of students trained on campus. So far this year, LI has trained 1,177 students across the country. We've held 3 youth leadership schools, 33 youth leadership workshops, 38 coaching sessions, 40 one-on-one media trainings, and 18 campus selection workshops. This morning, 2 students who were trained by the campus selection workshop coordinator, Timothy Cleveland, appeared on Fox and Friends to talk about liberal bias at their universities. This year alone, we have trained over 65 students to run for student government, and 25 of those conservative students have already been elected in their SGAs thanks to LI training. In Scottsdale, Arizona this past weekend, we had 50 student leaders from across the country attend the Student Activism Conference to learn how to become more effective with their groups on campus. Later this month, the Center for Youth Leadership will host 2 youth leadership schools in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Simi Valley, California, along with several other workshops around the country. And many of these students who attend these trainings will go on to run youth efforts on campaigns of their own and receive other positions within the movement. One of our recent graduates from the Dallas Youth Leadership School, Eduardo Gonzalez, recently received an internship in Senator Marco Rubio's office. This is just one example of the many LI grads working in the movement today. LI's campus leadership program is very active across the country and is well on its way to training more leaders for America.
Thank you, Kaylee. You're doing a great job. And now I want to especially thank the donors to the Leadership Institute. We have a number of donors here. I appreciate your support, and you're helping us build a new generation of conservative leaders. And we chose last year to set a big goal with a program which we set the goal to train. We did this last year to double the number, the programs of the Leadership Institute, and to train in last year, this year, and next year 70,000 new people. Now, our speaker is going to be introduced in a minute, but I just have to say, because it probably wouldn't be in the introduction, that our speaker, who has been a long-time conservative leader, spent many years at the White House as a special assistant to the president, almost 8 years. And his responsibilities were similar to the responsibilities which I had working as a special assistant to the president at the White House. On the other hand, while he was there twice as long as I was a special assistant to Ronald Reagan. Raiden Stolle is from Firestone, Colorado, and recently graduated from high school. He's applying to Hillsdale College and Colorado Christian University to study political science and business. Raiden was vice president of his student council while homeschooling, co-captain of the football team, and yes, homeschoolers can have football teams, and he continues to sing at his church. He attends the Weld County district meetings, giving him insight on local government and how few people show up each week. His church, unlike some other churches, believes that the church must be part of politics and preaches that to the congregation, and that gives him solid conservative Christian values in politics. A major rewarding part of political activism is just showing up. So I ask Raiden to step up here and give a good introduction to our speaker.
Hello. Tim Gigline champions God's welcoming role in public squares. His years in policy service and private initiative has been devoted to faith, freedom, and family. He serves high-level government posts for 2 decades, including as special assistant, like Morton said earlier, to President George W. Bush, where he was the Deputy Director of the White House of Public Liaison from 2001 to 2008. He was the President Principal Outreach Contact for conservatives, think tanks, veteran groups, faith-based groups, and some of America's leading cultural organizations. Gigline is the author of the political memoir, The Man in the Middle, Faith and Politics in George W. Bush Era, which was published in September 2011. His second book, America Restoration, How Faith, Family, and Personal Sacrifice Can Heal Our Nation, in 2019, in which he offers a roadmap to national and spiritual renewal by examining American culture. His new book, Toward a More Perfect Union, The Moral and Cultural Case for Teaching the Great American Story, in 2023. From 1988 through 1998, Tim was the Deputy Press Secretary and then Press Secretary and Communications Directors for U.S. Senator Dan Coates from Indiana, who was in Senate for a decade. Between his time with the Senate and the Bush campaign, Tim served as Communication Director for Gary Buer in his presidential bid. Tim holds honorary doctorate degrees from Concordia University, New York City, and from Faith Evangelical College and Seminary, Tacoma, Washington. His hobbies include reading, tennis, swimming, biking, and the fine arts. The most important things to know about Tim is that he is married to the love of his life, Jenny, for 31 years, and they have 2 sons, Tim and Paul, one in the public policy and one in the fine arts and music. Please hold your questions till afterwards, and a mic is provided to you, and there will be a book signing afterwards right in front of the elevator. Please welcome Tim Gigline.
Good morning, everyone. I have been an attendee at this breakfast a number of times over the years, but I've never been honored as I have been this time to be offering a few remarks. But before I do, I'm honor-bound to say three things, if I may. The first is that Morton Blackwell is a national treasure. That's not a talking point. I actually mean that. I have known Morton a very long time. I came to Washington in the summer of 1985 to intern for Dan Quayle. Remember him? And the next summer, Dan Coates in the Senate, the House, Roger Mudd at NBC News. And I remember the response at NBC News in Washington when they asked what I was due during the week, and I said, I hang out with people from the Leadership Institute. They said, isn't that conservative group in Arlington? And I said, you bet yes. You should have seen the faces then. The second thing is I was mentioning to Morton in my role as vice president at Focus on the Family, I travel about a third of the time. I suppose, like Morton, I live on airplanes and out of suitcases. And I was speaking in Nebraska, of all places, last week at a luncheon. And one of the women asked me, is there anything about Northern Virginia that's redeemable anymore? And I said, yes, Arlington National Cemetery and the Leadership Institute. So they may erase a lot of things, but they'll never erase the Leadership Institute. The third thing to say is the most important thing, which is that despite the result in Chicago yesterday, and despite the result in Wisconsin yesterday, and despite all of the other things from yesterday and all the yesterdays, whatever, that we are conservatives. And it is about tomorrow, and it's about moving our country forward toward a vision completely consonant with all the first principles of the Leadership Institute and Focus on the Family. And I'm an inveterate optimist. The best days for our country are ahead of us. They are not behind us. And the other side works on our disengagement, and they work on our despair and discouragement. But you know what? The sun came up this morning over beautiful America. We have a lot of work to do, so let's get busy. And may I say, in my third book, which is Toward a More Perfect Union, I wanted to get, if I may, at some of the things that I just mentioned. And so I want to begin, if I may, where I begin the book, which is a hallway conversation which became a great friendship with the great American historian David McCullough. Now, this is the first time I've ever met David. I've read all of his books, and I hope you have as well. And in our very first conversation, he said he was suffering from insomnia. What a strange way to begin a friendship. Why are you suffering from insomnia? He said, I spend a lot of time with the political class. I spend a lot of time on campuses. And he said, I've come to the conclusion that there is a measurable constitutional, cultural, and historic illiteracy in the United States. And in my book, I begin actually with a quote from his doctor, who said that every day, as McCullough reads the papers, it seems as if leaders are taking positions based on politics. Sound familiar? And have forgotten about history. They are unaware of the past and uninterested in how they will be remembered in the future. And so as I was doing research for my book, and by the way, I'm happy to say that some of the empirical data I'm going to share are outside the young people like the ones who comprise the Leadership Institute, right? And I want to share, after reams of data, a poll, a survey that is very consonant with the current data. And look at these numbers. This is a typical survey from 2009 given in Oklahoma to public high school students, and they were given the same test that is given to people who want to become legal immigrants. I mean, this is the floor of what you need to know about American history. Look at these numbers. Only 1 in 4 could name George Washington as the first president of the United States. Only 10% knew that there are 9 justices on the United States Supreme Court. less than 30% knew that the president heads the executive branch of our government. By the way, only 3% were able to answer 6 out of the 10 questions. That is the passing score, right, for the U.S. leadership test. And as I conclude in my book, these students would now be in their mid to early 30s. They're casting votes. Undoubtedly, these days, they're attending rallies, right? And they're even running and holding political office. This is the important point. Yet they are woefully ignorant of our history and our system of government. Being an optimist, for my book, I took a look at some, if I may say, the crosstabs, right? What do they actually know or not know? This is one example. And I knew that I was coming to the Leadership Institute. I knew Morton was going to be here, and I thought this would be particularly apt. Okay, look at this. A 2009 survey found that more than half the respondents attributed this quote, "From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs." People here know, of course, that's Karl Marx. That's one of the most powerful sentences of the 20th century. But in this particular survey, more than half the respondents thought that that was either George Washington or Thomas Paine or Barack Obama, not from the author of the Communist Manifesto. By the way, same era, not to overwhelm you with data, but just to drive home the point, all right? This is from our friends, and I know Morton's and Leadership Institute focus on the family, our friends at the Intercollegiate Studies Institute, ISI. This is a very big survey, 2,500 Americans, right? Look at these numbers. This is all Americans. Only half of adults could name the 3 branches of our government, including only 36% of college graduates who could do so. 18%, almost 20%, could not name a single right or freedom guaranteed under the United States Constitution. The highest performing school on the civics test administered by ISI was Harvard University. Those students scored under 70%. Even grading on an inflationary scale, that's a D+. Now, what I did in my research for Toward a More Perfect Union, what I did is I went ahead 10 years, okay? And I found this 2018 survey done by, maybe it's the only time he's ever been mentioned here, the Woodrow Wilson National Fellowship Foundation. They surveyed people in all 50 states. Look what they found. Only 53% were able to earn a passing grade in U.S. history. 37% believe that Benjamin Franklin invented the light bulb. We all know that's Thomas Edison. All right, now, look at this one. 12% believe that Dwight Eisenhower led the military in the American Civil War. By the way, I put in parenthesis, the Civil War ended in 1865, and Eisenhower was not born until 1890. All right? By the way, because I was coming here, a bit of humor. It's the morning, even on a beautiful morning like this. 2% said climate change caused the Cold War. Right? Now, there was an ACTA, American Council of Trustees and Alumni. They found that 43% of college graduates do not know that freedom of speech is guaranteed to them under our First Amendment. Okay, what is the easy conclusion from some of this data? The easy conclusion is that we are living in an era not where we are on a road to constitutional or historic or cultural illiteracy. We are already there. If anybody in this room, and I'm sure it's all of us, have had those moments where we, of course, assume that people know who George Washington is, that we, of course, assume that people who know what the First Amendment is, or when the Civil War was, or all the other basic facts, we're living in an era where they don't. And so the second part of my book says, why? right? The first part of Toward a More Perfect Union looks at the data to say, where are we? The second part of the book says why. I'm going to share some of that in a minute, but I wanted to divert for just a moment. Morton has told me about the new, exciting, terrific, wonderful, faith-based program you have, very consonant with our work at Focus on the Family. Okay? And in my book, I devote a very substantial part to the idea of religious liberty and rights of conscience, even if you're not a religious person, even if you're not a faith-based person, right? Why should we be concerned about the erasure of religious liberty and rights of conscience? By the way, I would say if we don't have religious liberty and rights of conscience, then we no longer have the United States of America. Okay? And I'm assuming most or all of us agree in that regard. But what I did is I decided not to pick a fellow Christian, and I am a Christian. I decided not to pick a fellow conservative, and I'm a conservative, right? I picked George Orwell. And Orwell wrote a very famous essay. I commend it to everybody here. And in this essay, he said, "He who controls the language controls politics." Okay? The first answer to why we are living in an age of constitutional and historic illiteracy is that it is purposeful. It is manipulative. It's not a coincidence. Okay? I didn't come to the Leadership Institute to talk about pigs, but Orwell famously says, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. We all know this quote from one of his most famous novels, Animal Farm. And I apply it to religious liberty, convincing Americans that equality demands that we treat religious individuals and organizations worse than others is a masterstroke of language manipulation. And we are living in that era. Okay. Now, I happen to be a John Adams man. Okay? I believe that Adams is not only in the pinnacle of our founding fathers, I believe that even in that pinnacle, as a constitutionalist and conservative, that he is completely underrated and often forgotten. Look at this date, 1798. Now, please know this. Adams was a certifiable genius. He wrote one of the most important treatises on the Constitution. You all know that neither Adams nor Jefferson were at the Constitutional Convention, right? Adams was in London, Jefferson in Paris. I'm sure they were texting and emailing every hour at Independence Hall to find out, how things were going. Okay. But well after that period of time, look at what Adams wrote in his address to the Massachusetts militia. By the way, when you are a wordsmith, and Adams and Jefferson were two of the greatest wordsmiths in American history, when they use words like only and never, they mean it. And here's what Adams wrote. He said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." Wow. Drink that one in with your morning coffee or tea. That's major. Those are two remarkably important sentences. History, I think, has proven Adams to be correct. When people abandon, to Morton's opening comments to us, when people abandon a moral or righteous foundation, societies collapse. Many of the ills we face as a nation, and we have seen them just this week, incivility, broken families, drug abuse, urban violence, they are manifestations of this spiritual recession, which is a reality not only in America, but in the West. We have replaced the blueprint bequeathed to us through the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution with a blank document that each person is told to fill in for himself or herself. Don't take my word for it on any of this. Think back just a few months. Now, I'm not asking rhetorically. Did anybody at this breakfast think that they would ever attend or watch a Supreme Court nomination hearing for any of 9 Americans in a country of 350 million souls to have a future Supreme Court justice asked, "Can you define a woman?" And to have her say with a straight face, "No." That is culture before history. That is culture before politics. Adams was correct. Now, Eisenhower. I went back and I read the 1953 inaugural address. It is a very powerful speech, long forgotten. And he says in one sentence what I think is almost a prophetic observation. He says, "A people that values its privileges above its principles soon loses both." And I think we have forgotten our principles while exalting our privileges. But without principles to serve as a foundation, we will eventually lose our privileges. And that is what we're seeing playing out in our culture every day. By the way, Abraham Lincoln was a Euclidean. He said you can't just assert, you have to demonstrate. Anybody here from California? Anybody have California roots? Do you know who Father Sarah is? Right. Okay, now this young man is from California. I'm not embarrassing you or singling you out, I promise. But, and you're not a plant, we've never met. I'm raising my right hand. I was at a major university just a couple of months ago. Spoke in 7 classes to about 1,500 students. Lots of Californians, all in your age range. Across 1,500 students, 1 knew who Father Sarah is. Okay? Father Sarah is the founder of California. I'm glad your eyebrows went up. Okay? This extraordinary, majestic, remarkable, incredible state, controlled by the progressive left, has effectively erased the founder of its own state. Abraham Lincoln. You all know that here in Washington, we have the delegate who represents the District of Columbia, who has filed legislation in the House just a few weeks ago to dismantle the Abraham Lincoln Memorial, not the famous one, but the other one that was paid for by emancipated slaves on Capitol Hill. She has filed legislation to have it dismantled. Right? Winston Churchill. I was speaking in January this year. Wasn't speaking about Churchill or World War II, but mentioned that I have 4 uncles who fought in World War II, and I mentioned Churchill. And after I spoke, several young people came up to the podium saying to me, "We've never heard of Winston Churchill. He sounds like he was really a remarkable guy." Yeah, we're all laughing like the Cheshire Cat. By the way, just a few miles from where we're standing is the indispensable man's ancestral home, Mount Vernon. If Mount Vernon were under the hands of the Commonwealth of Virginia, the erasure would be underway. Don't take my word for it. Anybody here been to Monticello? Yeah, all right. Or the ancestral home of James Madison. These are the authors. These men were under the age of 35. Remember this. Under the age of 35, drafting the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. They've been erased in their own ancestral homes. Anybody read Real Clear Politics? I beg you to read the piece this week on Williamsburg, Virginia. The complete and total undermining of American history. By the way, I'm a conservative. Theodore Roosevelt was a progressive. Roosevelt is an extraordinary American by any objective measure. He was a naturalist. He was a historian. He gave his permanent collection to found the first museum of natural history in the United States. Did you know that just a year and a half ago, his statue and memorial in front of the Museum of Natural History in the heart of Manhattan was cut into 3 pieces, carted up, and mailed off to North Dakota? This is happening in the United States of America. And look what Barry Weiss says. I quote her at length in Toward a More Perfect Union. She said the primary mode of this ideological movement, she's speaking about cancel culture. By the way, this is our history, your history. The primary mode of this cancel culture is not building or renewing or reforming, but tearing down. Persuasion is replaced with punishment. Mercy is replaced with vengeance. Pluralism with conformity. Debate with deplatforming. Facts with feelings. Ideas with identity. This is the balkanization, the tribalism of the United States of America. Again, to Morton's point, echoing Victor Davis Hanson, we are living right now through a revolution. By the way, anybody hear of the 1619 Project? Okay. The 1619 Project posits that the United States of America was not born in 1776, but in 1619, when the slave ships came to the coastlands of what is now the Commonwealth of Virginia. Hand over heart, I do not speak this way. I promise. But this is a lie. The 1619 Project is irredeemably flawed. Guess what? It's being taught in 4,500 American schools. Okay? Its author, I've read everything that she has written, right? Nicole Hannah Jones. It's toxic. She says the fight over the 1619 Project is not about history, it is about memory. That's right. Let me deepen this. The propaganda, the willful misinformation of the rising generation of young Americans is purposely and has been for more than a half century been perpetrated willfully to arrive at the moment where we have arrived at. It's not just bad parenting or bad schools. It's the curriculum. It's the ideas that are perpetrated by the progressive left, which, with the exception only of the church and the natural family, now control all American institutions. By the way, Hannah Jones said she was honored, that's her word, to claim responsibility for the violent, destructive mobs who toppled statues and engaged in violent actions in 2020. By the way, President Biden has cited the 1619 Project in the new guidelines for federal grants, all federal grants, from the Department of Education. Howard Zinn, everybody know who this person is? If you don't, he should be on the tip of your tongue, because he is the ultimate first creator of the misinformation and propaganda of which I am speaking and which informs the golden narrative of my book. He single-handedly transformed the study of history in American public education from the discipline of surveying facts and events to the display of reframing and reimagining facts to fit his particular narrative. By the way, his book, A People's History of the United States, is in its 40th printing and has been used as the primary text for millions of young Americans. And as Mary Graber says, who I quote extensively in my book, his propaganda has been spectacularly effective. Yes, it has. His dishonest American history is not the only factor in America's turn away from our heritage of freedom towards communist fantasies, but he has been instrumental in this destructive transformation. In other words, and this is the bottom line, Howard Zinn has succeeded in convincing a generation of Americans that the nation that Abraham Lincoln called the last best hope on earth is essentially a racist criminal enterprise built on murdering Indians, exploiting slaves, and oppressing the working man. By the way, anybody here with a family with any World War II connections whatsoever? Okay, a lot of us. Howard Zinn writes that, among other things, that the United States became involved in World War II to protect the imperial interests of the United States of America. Right. Yes. By the way, this has been taught now overwhelmingly as the primary text in American schools. So the answer is that this has been willfully done. This was proactively foisted on the country. All right. The 1776 project is something that everybody here should be familiar with. It is the best counter to the 1619 project. I have recommended it overwhelmingly, and I hope literally everybody here will read the 1776 project. It is beautifully done. All right. Now, final comment in honor of Morton. I'm raising my right hand. There are very few farewell addresses by any president, right, that could ever equal the famous farewell address from George Washington. But I found one. It's the one by Ronald Reagan. And I hope and pray that everybody finds time to go back and look at this prophetic farewell address from 1989, okay? Reagan says, and I think this could almost be a credo or mission statement for the Leadership Institute. Listen to these incredible words. An informed patriotism is what we want. We've got to do a better job of getting across that America is freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise, and freedom is special and rare. Reagan says it's fragile, it needs protection. He says if we forget what we did, we won't know who we are. Now listen to this. If you forget everything I've said this morning, listen to this. I'm warning of an eradication of the American memory that could result ultimately in the erosion of the American spirit. That's where we're at. He says, let's start with some basics. More attention to American history and civic ritual. All great change happens at the dinner table. So tomorrow night in the kitchen, I hope the talking begins. That's it. And may I say, I conclude toward a more perfect union. By the way, the subtitle is The Moral and Cultural Case for Teaching the Great American Story. Okay, now I want to be clear. I get up every day as an American, and I promise you, I treat that day as Thanksgiving Day. This is an exceptional, remarkable, extraordinary country, and we get to live here. In all the nations of the world, the United States is an exemplary, exceptional country with a genuinely, objectively remarkable history. It is worth defending. And right now, this moment, we are living at a hinge point of American history. The rising generation of young Americans and the people that the Leadership Institute and Focus on the Family connect with, we have got to be overwhelmingly intentional about the first principles of this beloved and remarkable country. And I close the book, as I close my remarks today, in total gratitude. You know, I think gratitude is good for the soul, you know? And if I say I'm an inveterate optimist, which I am, there has to be a reason why. And here's why. Because it is not accurate to say that we have never been this divided before. We have been a house divided before. In the Civil War, 1/3 of all Americans were for the Revolution, but 2/3 were either indifferent or for the British. That's major division. The nullification crisis, which is almost forgotten now, major division. The Civil War, 700,000 plus Americans lost their lives. Brothers were shooting each other in their peach orchards. We've been divided, right? 2 world wars, a Great Depression, the moral and social revolution of the 60s, Watergate, Vietnam, we've been divided. The question is not whether we've been divided. The question is, how do we recognize the moment we are in and move toward regeneration, renewal, and restoration? That's our great challenge. I believe that's the historic moment we are in, and it's why I wrote Toward a More Perfect Union, because I believe that there is a moral and cultural case for teaching the great American story. And my hope and prayer is that you and your 50,000 best friends will get the book, share it as a tool in our toolbox, because we love our country. So we have a tall task, and may God grant us with His benighted light. Thank you, and God bless.
Tim, you will take questions?
Yes, I will be happy to.
All
I'm
right.
happy to take questions. We'll pretend we're all best friends so no one is shy. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Barbara Bowie Whitman.
Hello.
When I was 15 years old, I read a book called Neither 5 Nor 3
Yes.
by a woman named Helen McGinnis who wrote spy novels.
Yes, indeed.
The thesis of the book, although it's a novel, was that the international communist movement was bound and determined to take over
Yes.
education and media in the United States. They succeeded.
Yes,
Now
Howard Zinn was identifiably a neo-Marxist. I should have mentioned that.
Good. I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear that. But
Yeah.
not that I want a bunch of Marxists, but I'm glad you
Yeah.
identified it.
Right.
The current situation where we have, the former Soviet Union is a little bit disintegrated but still evil. And we have the Chinese joining us.
Yes.
And undermining us from within in a different way. So it seems we have an awful lot of forces working against us.
We do.
And to what degree do you think that this is outside forces, or have they already taken us over from within?
I remember thank you for that great question. I remember during the Obama administration when the president shut down the federal government because of his irresponsibility, and he didn't know that one of these honor flights was coming into Washington that morning, all filled with former Normandy veterans. Do you remember when this happened? And President Obama deigned, if you can imagine, this actually happened, he closed the World War II memorial. Okay? The bus of all these old guys who charged Normandy, they went to the World War II memorial with all the media there wondering what are they going to do with their walkers and wheelchairs. You know what they did? They got out of the bus, they walked to the memorial, and they pushed the stanchions out of the way. And one of the reporters from MSNBC said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Oh, this is okay." 92 years old, by the way. He said, "This is okay because when we came to Normandy, it was closed as well." Here is a fact. It does not matter, ultimately, that the neo-Marxists control presently our cultural institutions. Of course, we don't want that to be the case. Here's what matters. What are we going to do to counter it? And may I tell you, when I come to Leadership Institute, when I go, and I do, I spend a lot of time inside the conservative movement, young men and women of faith. They have a different view and a different vision. May I share just one fact to your point? You're going to levitate through the day. 1993 in our country, 1993, there were 30,000 homeschooled students. That number today in 2023 is a little over 4 million. We are living in the midst of a parental and grandparental rebellion. People are saying, "What is a school board? How do I run for the school board? What's being taught in schools? Tell me, well, what is a curriculum?" You see, for a long time, I'm the last year of the baby boom generation. I tell Morton my great regret being born in January of 1964 is that I couldn't vote for Goldwater, okay? Now, okay, right. So all right, great. Well, I'm the baby boom. We followed it up. But one thing, if I may say, we were too compliant and too trusting of institutions. These institutions were overtaken, and we realized it too late. So I believe that the little platoons right now are being trained to go reclaim the ground that's been lost. But you know what? As conservatives, we believe it begins locally. This is what I say in the book, by the way. It's not going to be Silicon Valley, Wall Street, Hollywood, Washington. It begins in the home. It begins in the church. It begins in the neighborhood. It's localism, and then it wells up. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Shall I hold it? You holding it? Okay. All right. Firstly, thank you so much for talking today. It was really interesting.
Thank you. What is your name?
I'm Oscar.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you. I was wondering what you think, or if you think that American students and American children should only ever be taught positive things about American history, or
no.
do you think that?
I'm glad you asked. The answer is no. And you know what? This is in part why I wrote the book. The antidote to history is opposition to arrogance. Okay? The goal here is not to say that so much history, both of the United States and in the West, the goal here is not to say that it's been overtaken by the left. That's a fact. And the way that we're going to counter it is not to write a book that kind of skewers all the facts to the right-hand side. In this book, at length, I'm very comfortable saying that nations, like individuals, are flawed. Nobody's perfect. Not a single country is perfect, and not one person is perfect other than Jesus Christ, right? In whose week we're in the holiest of most weeks, if I may say, all right? But this book acknowledges the sins of the past, but it also says, you know what? Great countries, great men, great women, we have flaws. But that doesn't mean that the response is erasure and cancel culture. It's to better understand the facts. It's why taking down memorials is very dangerous, because memorials and public artwork help us better understand history and culture. You know? Are you from England? You're aware, I'm sure, that the great Churchill statue in front of Westminster has been repeatedly vandalized. Hand over heart. There was a time, not very long ago, where that would have never been conceivable or possible. Never. Never is a big word, right? It's not that we look to Churchill or to Washington or Lincoln or whomever to say they're perfect. By the way, one quick example. In my book, I write at length about Chief Seattle, the namesake for one of our greatest cities. Please trust me, the overwhelming majority of people who live in Seattle have no idea who Chief Seattle is. Why? He's one of the great Americans. Without Chief Seattle, we wouldn't have the northwest part of our country. I'll tell you why, because he was a slaveholder, and it doesn't fit their mode. You can't be great and hold slaves. The answer is yes, you can. Slavery is indefensible. But over against other achievements, we have to measure. Discernment and reason is a gift. We have to apply it. Yes. Yes, sir.
Is there any institution larger than the American family in which socialism and communism actually functions?
The answer is, I love short questions and short answers. No. You know, Margaret Thatcher famously said, that the problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of spending other people's money, right? That's absolutely right. Socialism does not work. It's like our Italian friends, Fossi di Eclair. That's a very nice idea that doesn't work. Right. Socialism does not work. Right. Period. Yes. Thanks for short questions. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
So my question for you is, how do you personally think that I was at the July March? How do you think the news people are covering up the history of true facts about things that are going on today in our world?
That's a great question as well, and I'd use yesterday as a good example. This is the first time in the history of the United States that any president has ever been indicted, ever been arrested, okay? Whether you are left or right, in the news media, your responsibility is objectivity. That idea seems as antiquated as yesterday's newspaper. Our journalism schools and the media have replaced good writing, good thinking. They have replaced it with ideology. I know where I'm standing again. One of the great conservatives, unfortunately too often forgotten, Russell Kirk, he said, let ideology be anathema. What he meant is, don't ever allow anything to come in place of truth. The job of the media is to tell the truth. That's it. That's their job. You know, it's like members of the Supreme Court who think their job is to write laws or to execute. I mean, they have primarily, intentionally forgotten what their role is. And that's the job of the media. Right. We have time for one more? Yes. I'm sorry, there's a lot of questions, and if I'm not calling on you, it's nothing personal. It's because we all believe it's good to be busy.
Thank you for your message today.
My pleasure. I hope I said something worth hearing.
Yes. There's an argument that one of the things that makes the American Constitution unique is the system of checks and balances and separation of powers. What do you think are the biggest threats to our system of checks and balances today, and what should we be doing about that?
The willful neglect of the United States Constitution. The Constitution is the center of the United States of America, built from the Judeo-Christian tradition. Without the Judeo-Christian tradition, which brings us to the Constitutional Convention ultimately, right? Without the United States Constitution, by the way, there are many countries with constitutions, many. The question is not whether you have a constitution. The question is whether the meaning of the Constitution has a fixed, timeless meaning, and it does. When you look at the actual Constitution, it's very short. It's 4 pages, 4 short pages. It's fleet. Madison was a fleet writer, right? Article 1, as you know, which is our legislative branch, is nearly half of one of those 4 pages. The presidency is tiny. The Supreme Court is tiny. That wasn't a mistake. That's the way it was intended to be. Why? Because it's we the people. And the genius of the Constitution is that it pushes all the power downward and outward. Our founders did not want centralized power in Washington, D.C., right? And so borrowing from Montesquieu, borrowing from Locke, right? They wanted decentralization. They wanted lots of power in local hands, lots of power in regional hands, and very little power in federal hands. I love the fact the Federalist Society. It's perfectly named. That's what it's about, right? Lots of power to the states, very little power, unless it's an enumerated power in the Constitution, to the federal government. And this is what the progressives have foisted on our country. And it's why it's more important than ever, not just that everybody read the Constitution, but it's particularly important from very young ages that young Americans read the Constitution, read the Declaration, read the Federalist Papers, read the Anti-Federalist Papers. This is the history of our nation.
Okay. Thank you so much.
God bless you all.
Just hold on for one more moment. You can see why we invited Tim Gagline. What a terrific speaker he is. I want to give him another round of applause. At each breakfast, it is our policy at this moment to present to our speaker an Adam Smith tie. But knowing Tim, I think he only wears bow ties, and we don't have for sale Adam Smith bow ties. So we're going to present Tim with a set of Leadership Institute mugs, 4 mugs, and these mugs contain my 45 laws of the public policy process.
Great.
I don't think you got a set of mugs. So
I don't. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I invite you to join us On May 3rd for our next Wednesday Wakeup Club breakfast. I encourage you to RSVP online at leadershipinstitute.org/breakfast. Caleb Crandall, will you come up here, please? I invite anyone interested in a tour of our Stephen P.J. Wood building and the Emerson and Dolores Rice Center for Campus Reform to meet with Caleb here. He's a tall guy, long hair, easy to recognize. He's in our Growth and Development Department, and Caleb is here to give any of you who wish a great tour of the Leadership Institute, and he's ready to answer any questions that you might have. And if he can't answer a tough question you ask, he'll pop up to our office and ask me. Thank you all. Thank you so much for your attendance.